All right, everybody. I'm live, or according to the internet, I am. So let me know if you don't mind if you can hear and see me in the chat, and that way we can get started on a Tuesday night, which is not usual, but definitely necessary because I can't just keep skipping these weekly reports. We've got to be on the same page, and I appreciate all of you understanding me having to take a day off in order to be here tonight. So thank you all so much. I got 5x5s coming in the chat right now. The original OSOK says LFG. Then we have Harbor Prepper 5x5, Mr. Landfill 5x5, WTC with the 5x5, and we have Abracadabra with the 5-finger death punch. So I think we are on our way to having a good chat. And obviously tonight we're talking about how our enemies are accelerating their war preparations, and we have stuff coming out of North Korea as well as Russia, and these are things that we just need to pay attention to because they kind of help build a timeline of expectations when it comes to this global conflict scenario that we're all trying our best to prepare for because we just don't know which way this whole thing is going to go. 5x5 Wolverines comes in from AK Not or A Not 2099. Why would K be in front of the word not, right? Of course, that's not real English. Anyway, I do want to mention that Midway USA is the biggest supporter of the channel. Thanks to them, I can get live streams like this one out to you all to try to provide good information. And then, of course, if you want to get better prepared via equipment and gear and everything else related to preparedness, make sure you check out Midway USA and thank them for supporting what I do here on the channel. And, of course, all the live streams are directly sponsored by magicprepperbeef.com. And no, it's not where I can talk trash to you directly over the internet. It's just where you can get shelf-stable, long-term survival beef. This is ribeye, filet mignon, it's New York strip, it's sous vide, it's already packaged, it's already freeze-dried. All you have to do is set it on the shelf, and it's good for a minimum of 10 years. And once you rehydrate it, throw some seasoning on it because the only ingredient is beef. There is nothing in here. It will taste bland if you don't have that salt stored away that you definitely should. And of course, if you use the code MAGICPREPPER, you get 15% off your order, which is great because this stuff is not inexpensive, but it is very good and high quality. So magicprepperbeef.com is where you can find all that. Check it out if you're interested. See if it's something that you might find beneficial for your preparedness pantry. Okay, so, and nice offset back there, Magic Prepper. Is that in Candy Apple Red? Yes. Yes, it is. All right, Nick, I buy a lot of stuff from Midway USA because of you. Well, I appreciate that, Nick. Thank you so much, and thanks for always supporting the channel. Kevin Ramsey, good to see you. Porky Prepper, good to see you too. So far in our poll tonight, if you want to participate, it's at the top of the chat. 71% of you think that our enemies are most likely to act before the election. 17% think after the election, and 12% think that nothing will happen or they will never act, okay? So that's where we're at right now as a community, and it's kind of good to know where everyone's at, and we should at least entertain each other's opinions on that just because none of us actually know, right? So it's good to kind of know where everybody's head's at. Now, let's see here. James says, is it true that Magic Prepper is dating Nate, the Canadian prepper? Angry Prepper told me this. Well, no, it's not true. I'm married and I have children, so I just don't think that would work out very well for me. But that's just because I don't have a mustache and wear sunglasses on all my streams. Anyway, let's move forward into tonight's conversation. We have to start what we're doing, and then we're going to jump into what our enemies are up to, because this reporting that's going on surrounding this information right now isn't necessarily building the full picture, right? It's all incremental and every story is separate and individual, but when you start adding them all together, you can see the context of what our enemies are actually starting to do, and it could drive a little bit more concern than what you would see just from reading one story to the other, right? So that's what I try to do here is build context about what we're preparing for and who we should be concerned about when it comes to some of this conflict that we're talking about right now on the world stage. So first off, we are doing drills with Japan and South Korea, and things are mostly happening because of our need to prepare for things to happen in that theater. And North Korea is obviously a big threat, but we're also talking about China here. And weirdly enough, this entire article doesn't really mention Russia at all, when in reality, they're still one of our biggest concerns because we're currently in a proxy war with them, right? So I just find that interesting, but let's move on. This is all from this week. Anything that's from before this week is just to build context in order to show you why something might be more important. And if you're here on the replay crew on a Wednesday this time, Thanks for being here. Make sure you check in and say hi in the comments because it really helps motivate me to keep doing these things. As North Korean and Chinese threats rise, U.S. looks to lock in defense partnerships with Asian allies, right? This is from the Associated Press, and this is from June 29th, okay? The United States wrapped up its first multi-domain exercise with Japan and South Korea in the East China Sea on Saturday, a step forward in Washington's efforts to strengthen and lock its security partnerships with key Asian allies in the face of growing threats from North Korea and China. The three-day Freedom Edge increased the sophistication of previous exercises with simultaneous air and naval drills geared toward improving joint ballistic missile defense, anti-submarine warfare, surveillance, and other skills and capabilities. The exercise, which was expected to expand in years to come, was also intended to improve the country's abilities to share missile warnings, increasingly important as North Korea tests ever more sophisticated systems, which we definitely will be talking about tonight. My throat is a little bit raspy because I'm still recovering from strep, but I'm just making it work because we got to have these conversations, okay? Outside of Australia, Japan and South Korea are the only U.S. partners in the region with militaries sophisticated enough to integrate operations with the U.S. so that if, for example, South Korea were to detect a target, it could quickly relay details so Japan or American counterparts could respond, said Ridwan Rahmat, a Singapore-based analyst with the defense intelligence company Janes. Excuse me. Like I said, still recovering, okay? So, interestingly enough, Japan and South Korea still have a rough relationship based on some grudges held over from World War II. And so that's something that's kind of being mended here, even though some people within those countries might not agree with this level of partnership. But it's all being put together because we're all aware of the risks and the possible escalations coming from North Korea, China, and Russia at this point in time. So this is all happening, and some of this happening always leads to more provocation, which means more escalation should be expected, which means more things can happen. So just be aware that we're doing this, and this drill was just ended, and our necessity to move forward with these types of militaristic drills with our allies in that region should be an indicator of how close we are to a possible conflict based on the fact that the escalation of these drills is necessary at this point in time, okay? Let's see here. I'm going to be okay, I promise. USMC Devil Dog 0311, good to see you. Thank you for modding as usual. It's always appreciated. And of course, I know this is a Tuesday night. It's a little different for everybody. So make sure you share the video and like and everything else. Subscribe just because it'll help spread it out a little bit more. And because YouTube and the people on YouTube aren't used to me on a Tuesday night, it probably has no idea what's going on right now, right? So let's kind of force the old algo to do what we want. Now, what else is going on in that region? So this is where we're going to start building our case against our enemies starting to accelerate their war preparations. And the reason why I want to discuss that tonight is that it's very clear to me that that's what's happening ever since we had this relationship start between Russia and North Korea. We now have this acceleration of preparations. And like I said before, each thing individually might not seem like a big deal, but once you combine them all together, you can kind of see where things are heading. And in my opinion, it shows that there is not only a expectation of conflict, but a willingness of conflict, which is probably more problematic, right? We don't want anyone to be willing to jump into war, and North Korea, of anyone I can think of, is probably the most likely to be okay with that concept, right? Let's see here. Harbor Prepper says, get yourself some coffee-flavored cough syrup. That's what I have right here, I thought, anyway. It's just coffee-flavored, but I'm pretty sure it can count as cough syrup as well. All right. So, let's make it happen. North Korea missile launch may have failed and fallen inland. Now, this story comes from the perspective of South Korea mostly, okay? And then the next one we're going to analyze will come from North Korea, and then that will kind of help us see where things are going and why we should be paying attention to what's happening right now, because I find it to be interesting. There's been a change of, I guess we'll just call it doctrine, when it comes to how North Korea publicly displays its propaganda, right? And that should maybe tell us that something may have changed based on this partnership. North Korea fired 2 ballistic missiles on Monday, which they mean yesterday, and the second may have failed and blown up during an irregular flight, possibly raining debris inland, South Korea's military said. South Korea was still analyzing the launch and did not immediately have confirmation whether there were any casualties or damage to North Korean property. Military spokesperson Lee Sung-jun told a briefing according to Reuters. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff earlier said that the North fired a short-range ballistic missile that flew about 600 kilometers, or 373 miles for all of us Americans here, and a second ballistic missile that flew about 120 kilometers, both from an area near the west coast. Both were fired towards the northeast, it said. The trajectory means the second may have fallen in an area close to the North's capital, Pyongyang, but Lee said the military was unable to comment further. South Korea has said it watches the North's missile launches from the preparation stage and tracks a projectile in flight. Excuse me. All right. We're going to make it through, I promise. We strongly condemn North Korea's missile launch as a provocation that seriously threatens peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula. The Joint Chiefs of Staff said in a statement, adding it shared information on the missiles with U.S. and Japanese authorities, which, like I said, we just wrapped up a military drill there with those countries, which is obviously part of why we're doing what we're doing in order to create more interoperability, but also possibly provoking North Korea to do more of what they're doing, right? So it's an endless cycle where everybody has to try to top the next person, and where does that end? Of course, it's not the greatest ending that we ever wanted, but that's probably what it will end with eventually, which will be more of a conventional war, at least in my opinion. So North Korea also has their own version of what happened, and this is where things get interesting. And this is why we're building context when we start talking about how our enemies are accelerating their war preparations, because I think that we can see some of that happening here based on this new relationship. All right. North Korea brags of new missile with super large warhead. Outsiders doubt the North's claim. Super large. It's so big. Now, that's why I put that in tonight's title, because this is what they're telling us. Now, it might not be true. It might be fluff. Who knows? But what I will say is that they're claiming it, right? So we shouldn't just dismiss things because of who's saying it. We should at least interpret it as them trying to progress when it comes to the style and capability of weapons that they're using, right? Nick, I don't like politics. However, the stuff that Biden and news outlets are saying about the Supreme Court is scary. They're saying they should impeach them and dissolve it. Sounds like real dictator stuff. Well, here's the thing, Nick. I don't really care what those people are saying anymore, because we all know exactly what types of people we're dealing with when it comes to politicians and the media. There's a large element of people in this country right now that are literally anti-American, and I don't know how else to say it, but it's just the truth, and it doesn't always split down party lines like some people like to believe. There are plenty of anti-American folks on both sides, but there is definitely a concentration of ones on certain arenas, and we're in a very precarious time right now for our nation, so just be aware of that. It's definitely not a beneficial place to be, okay? So this is from North Korea. Keep this in mind as we move forward. North Korea said Tuesday it had test-fired a new tactical ballistic missile capable of carrying a super-large warhead, a claim quickly disputed by South Korean officials and experts who speculate the North likely fabricated a successful test to conceal a botched launch. It's the second time that South Korea has questioned the North Korea's claims on the development of new weapons in recent days, as the rivals are locked in heightened animosities over the North's testing activities. The North's official Korean Central News Agency said that Monday's test involved the Hwasengpo 11DA 4.5 missile. I just said it that way because it's going to work for me, okay? Which can carry a 4.5-ton class warhead. It said the test was meant to verify the weapon's flight stability and hit accuracy at the maximum range of 500 kilometers and the minimum range of 90 kilometers. The test apparently refers to the two ballistic missile launches that South Korea said North Korea performed on Monday. Joint Chiefs of Staff spokesperson Lee Jung-soon said at a briefing later Tuesday that the second North Korean missile was found to have fallen on an uninhabited area near Pyongyang, the North's capital. He said he could find few previous test launches by North Korea that have aimed at ground target sites. Okay, now, North Korea is saying they're testing this new missile. They're saying it can carry a super large warhead. But here's the thing. What they're not saying is almost more interesting, all right? Regarding the North Korean assessment, we're weighing a possibility of deception. The South Korean military has said the second North Korean missile possibly traveled abnormally during the initial stage of its flight. It said the missile exploded, its debris would likely have scattered on the ground. The KCNA dispatch didn't say where it launched the new missile and where it landed. Unlike previous missile tests, North Korea also didn't publicize any photos of Monday's test. The fact that it tested both the missile's maximum and minimum ranges suggested North Korea performed 2 launches. KCNA, citing North Korea's missile administration, reported that North Korea will test fire the missile again later in July to verify the performances of its simulated warhead at the medium range of 250 kilometers. Some experts say test fire missiles at ground targets could be related to efforts to test how powerful warheads are to destroy underground bunkers and structures. But Shin Jong-woo, a Seoul-based military expert, said the lack of any photos on the launches means it's highly likely the North is trying to deceive the outsiders to cover up Monday's failed launches. He said North Korea likely launched an existing missile on Monday, not the new missile it claimed. Yang Uk, an analyst at Asan Institute for Policy Studies, said that Monday's test reflected North Korea's push to acquire a variety of conventional weapons. But he also said if North Korea truly succeeded in hitting a ground target, it probably would have already published related images to brag about its achievements, as it's done in the past. Well, here's the word of the day. Since 2022, North Korea has sharply accelerated weapons testing activities to enlarge its nuclear arsenal. The North Korea claimed ranges of the newly tested missile imply it targets South Korea. Experts say North Korea would ultimately want to use an expanded weapons arsenal to increase its leverage and future diplomacy with the U.S. Now, here's the thing. First off, this test was a first of its kind for North Korea. So it's supposed to be the most technologically advanced missile they've ever fired, right? But here's the other thing to keep in mind. Them not posting photos, them not providing proof, them not giving all the information of where they fired them from and where they fired them to and everything else in between may be based on deception, maybe some kind of misinformation from them in order to mislead the media or in order to deceive the South Koreans, right? But it also could have something to do with their partnership with Russia. Understand that not only do they now have a militaristic partnership with Russia, but that would mean that Russia is going to be, at least in my opinion, the most likely influencer to their future actions. When I say that, what I mean is they're clearly going to be holding the reins, right? They're going to be the big dog in that relationship. And it wouldn't surprise me if what their expectations of North Korea are involve more discretion when it comes to their activities, because it can allow for them to better strategize and to better position themselves for future conflict scenarios. The North Korea situation makes sense for them to brag and post photos and throw propaganda out there when they're just trying to get diplomatic sanction relief and everything else related to that from the West, right? But now, in a direct partnership with Russia, who also can provide lots of economic relief to a country like North Korea, that can also provide weapons of any type to a country like North Korea, now things may have changed in that regard. And so they may have failed the test. Sure. Could they have easily faked the concept of a test and included certain details that would have alluded to things being more realistic for the South to interpret? Pretty easily, I would assume. So a part of me wants to think that they're changing their doctrine in a preparation to work more closely with a country like Russia, while also maybe maintaining some level of secrecy to some of their new weapons technology. We're not in the same ballgame as we were before, as basically mentioned by that entire article from South Korea. Oh, they usually would have done this. They usually would have done that. Why haven't they done this? Where's our pictures, right? Well, it's not always because of incompetence or because of failure. Maybe their doctrine around how they want to expose themselves militarily has changed, especially now that they have someone else who might have made a phone call or told them how they should hold themselves moving forward or whatever it is, right? So we should look at these things as being preparations in the sense of them changing how they're acting, right? They're changing how they're acting about some of these said scenarios, which means there might be more to it. And I have more proof of that here in just a second for you. Now, let's see here. And Nick, thanks for the super chats. And just in case anyone's wondering, the super chats are not required. I will try my best to also interact with you in the chat if you just tag me as well. I understand that economic times are tough and that we're all trying our best to just get things going. I do appreciate the support, Nick. And then I also want to say that I appreciate all of you just being here, honestly, because it's a Tuesday night. It's out of our realm, but we're making it happen. So, let's see here. Dacta Squirrel says, it's like that one old guy that has done anything you were talking about to your buddy. Knows it all, but don't really know. I don't know what we're referring to there, but if it's me, I can understand that. So, Cherokee Survival, good to see you, as usual. Now, North Korea is also accelerating their landmine and fortification work on the inter-Korean border at the DMZ, the demilitarized zone. Why are they doing that, right? Well, this article speculates on it, and this is from July 1st, by the way. So this is from yesterday. Like, these things are all happening right now. So a lot of things are happening in North Korea since they've started this partnership with Russia, and a lot of these things are slightly out of character, right? We're rushing projects that are war preparation projects. We're rushing tests. We're not displaying propaganda in the same way we were before, right? There's a lot of things happening here. We're testing new weapons, right? Like there's a lot of stuff to just suddenly start happening or changing all of a sudden right after this partnership, and it makes you question what it is they're getting ready for, okay? Now, this article definitely focuses on the anti-Pyongyang loudspeaker broadcast that they have at the border, where the South is basically trying to convince soldiers from the North that what they're doing is dumb and that they should defect and everything else, right? But you tell me, but here we go. The North Korean authorities have sent more military personnel to the inter-Korean demilitarized zone to speed up the ongoing work of burying landmines and building fortifications. Speaking on condition of anonymity, a Daily NK source in the North Korean military said Wednesday that although work to bury landmines and build fortifications in the DMZ was initially carried out by frontline corps stationed in the areas concerned, many personnel of the military 7th and 8th General Bureaus, specialized engineering units, have been dispatched since authorities issued an order in mid-June to speed up the work. What's the rush? Why are we speeding it up? The 7th and 8th General Bureaus oversaw the construction of barriers and high-voltage power lines in the no-man's land along the China-North Korea border, the site of frequent defections and rampant smuggling from 2021 until recently. The North Korean government's deployment in the DMZ of specialized engineering units with experience in building barriers along the China-North Korea border suggests that it wants to complete the ongoing work in the inter-Korean buffer zone ahead of schedule. As a result, North Korean troops in the DMZ violated the military demarcation line several times in their haste to complete the work, despite an order to the frontline corps to raise their alert status by declaring a special patrol period for the entire military ahead of Russian President Vladimir Putin's visit to North Korea on June 18th. North Korean troops violated the MDL while working in the DMZ on June 9th and June 20th. They returned to their side of the line after receiving warning broadcasts and warning shots from South Korean troops. The simultaneous laying of landmines, clearing of vegetation, and construction of fortifications in and around the DMZ by the North Korean authorities appears to be aimed primarily at preventing defections by personnel of North Korea's frontline military police units tasked with patrolling the MDL. Okay, so this article is telling us how they're rushing these preparations, right? And that they primarily seem to be concerned with preventing defection, right? It's a theory. So, North Korea ordered the acceleration of work in the DMZ after the South Korean government ordered the resumption of anti-Pyongyang loudspeaker broadcasts for the first time in 6 years on June 6th in response to North Korea's launch of garbage-laden balloons into the South. By the way, yes, that happened. They literally rigged up a ton of garbage on balloons and sent it to South Korea, which is medieval warfare, by the way. So, chat. I just had a compressor turn on here in the room, which I didn't expect to turn on. Can you hear it? If you can, I will turn it off. But I'm hoping you can't thanks to my microphone's directional capabilities. Let me know. So, let's see here. Porky, mejor muerto que rojo. You what? I'm confused by that, to be honest with you. Why is the dead woman red? I'm not sure. We're pretty close, though, I think. Anyway, let's see here. Let's see. Mitch, I pay attention. It's just laughable. People think anything will happen when every day is the same. Nothing changes or happens. Well, I don't think every day is the same, Mitch, but I understand that thought process. Definitely not necessarily disagreeing with you. But I would say that like people in Ukraine were probably just like going to work one day and then Russia invaded, right? Something happened. These things do happen, you know. People who are just going to work on 9/11 in New York City were just feeling like nothing was going to happen that day, and then something happened. So like things just do happen, but it doesn't always happen as quickly or as frequently as some people would like us to think, I guess, right? So I understand the sentiment 100%, but I also would rather be ready for something to happen and nothing happen ever than not be ready for something to happen and then have something happen. So that's kind of the two sides of the card you have to play, right? Russia got bears that served in the military named Wojtek. I'm pretty sure that's cheating at war. Well, I don't know much about the rules of war, especially regarding Russia, but I do know that I would be afraid of a militaristic bear coming at me. I'm not quite prepared for that. And maybe that's their strategy, because let's be honest, 5.56, probably not the best bear caliber out there, and they know it. So there you go, right? That's why we're actually getting that SIG spear in 6.8, because of the bears. It's a thing no one's talking about, but it's the real truth behind it all. Now, here's the thing, okay? All of this article talks about how this is probably because the North doesn't want people defecting. So they're rushing, planting landmines, building fortifications. They're sending other regiments of soldiers to the area in order to get the work done ahead of schedule, right? And people are dying. They're going so fast. South Korean military authorities said on June 18th that several North Korean soldiers working in the DMZ had been injured or killed by landmine explosions. In a press briefing, an official from the Joint Chiefs of Staff said the North Korean military was rushing its work despite suffering several casualties from mine explosions as troops buried mines and cleared vegetation along the front line. So if they're only worried about defection, that they're doing this so fast that people are dying in the process, soldiers defecting and soldiers dying from their own landmines, you're still losing troops. So I just don't know if that's a reasonable assumption, that the speed at which they're trying to get this work done is solely due to the fact that they don't want more people to defect, right? But that's what we're being told here. And like I said, we're connecting dots here. And individual stories are kind of telling us all little tidbits about all these preparations that this country's doing. So right now we're at new missile technology being tested. Maybe it failed, maybe it didn't. Guess what you learn in a failure? You learn how to improve. SpaceX had plenty of rockets explode on launch, right? Like we all watched it. They failed, and they were able to then learn from that data and then go back to the drawing board, right? So like that failure is part of a test. Like tests don't always have to succeed to provide good data. Then we're not broadcasting our results the same way as we used to, right? And this is all in the vein of them working directly with Russia at this point in time. Now we're in a hurry to get our demilitarized zone fully fortified and mined for something, right? And is it because of defection? I mean, possibly. I'm not an expert on North Korea. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I am. But what I will say is that I'm connecting some dots here, right? So here's something that's really out of the ordinary and doesn't seem like it means anything. But now that we've talked about all these things, it seems like it might mean something, right? And that's kind of what we do here, right? We're connecting dots. We're trying to see what might be going on here. We have to try to read between the lines sometimes to kind of figure that out, right? So, and I do want to jump in here in the chat just for a second, because Majestic Lion just said 10 millimeter, and I was like, yeah, I like that too. So now I'm asking the chat, because I'm looking for a new 10 millimeter pistol, what should I be trying to get? Because right now I'm kind of thinking maybe an M&P 10 millimeter. I know they've had issues, but maybe I can figure that out, right? I thought about getting a P220 Legion in 10 millimeter, but it's big, it's heavy, it's single stack. I don't know. And then I know there's always the Glock 20. So you guys let me know, because I already know how Glocks work, right? Moving on. What else is North Korea doing to accelerate their war preparations? This is an interesting one, and one that probably doesn't really hit on a lot of people's radar for obvious reasons, because it seems weird and unrelated. But it sounds related to me. North Korea switches TV transmission to Russia satellite from Chinese. Interesting. This was reported yesterday, July 1st. North Korea has switched the transmission of state TV broadcasts to a Russian satellite from a Chinese one. South Korea's unification ministry said on Monday, making the monitoring of such broadcasts a challenge for the South's government, agencies, and media. Signals from North Korea's Korean Central Television were carried by a Russian satellite, Express 103, from June 29th, instead of the ChinaSat 12 satellite, a South Korean satellite dish service provider told Reuters. It declined to be named due to the sensitivity of the issue. Well, why does this matter? Well, first off, it shows that we are getting stronger ties with Russia than maybe even China in some ways, right? Like, who knows? And also, just keep in mind, even though we have this axis of evil developing when it comes to like our obvious adversaries out there, China still has a lot of investment in the US when it comes to their economy. And so I have zero doubts that they would do what they could to remove themselves from the equation in order to maintain their economic prosperity while likely still supporting everything from underneath, much in the way they are with drug cartels, for example, here in the United States. So just keep that in mind. Just because they're not necessarily like best friends all of a sudden doesn't mean that they're not involved. It just means that we might be doing some optics changes in order to create some level of loss of liability, right? The satellite change follows Russian President Vladimir Putin's visit to North Korea in June, during which he met North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and signed a treaty to deepen cooperation in all areas, including a mutual defense pledge. While it remains possible to watch North Korean TV online, the quality may be delayed or of low quality. South Korean government agencies and media monitor North Korean state media as a limited source of information from inside the reclusive state, despite its highly politicized and choreographed content. North Korea stopped using an existing Chinese satellite and began transmitting broadcasts through a Russian satellite, and reception of satellite broadcasts is being restricted in some areas on our side, a unification ministry official said, adding the ministry was looking to resolve the technical issue. Authorized entities in the South need access to the satellite service to watch North Korean broadcasts, and the general public is banned from accessing the North's media. Reuters has been unable to receive North Korean TV signals since Monday morning. While Russia and North Korea have made dramatic overtures showcasing deepening ties and vowed to resist the U.S.-led West, China has avoided any trilateral agreement that might complicate its relations with other countries. So, this is an interesting step. First off, it shows that that partnership is strong, right? And that Russia and Korea or North Korea are actually really trying to integrate. But second off, it is a form of communication. And now it's a form of communication that is being more directly controlled by Russia than China and has removed the ability of Western-aligned countries to monitor it, which means it might remove some of our ability to anticipate what they're doing, right? Or what's going on, or what they're saying, or what they're putting out there in the sense of propaganda. And this goes back to the original concept we were just discussing of how they may have changed their doctrine when it comes to being public about all of their information or all of their testing or all of their developments or progress. This is just one more piece of that puzzle. So think about it this way. If you were to suddenly find yourself in a war and your direct ally and military partner was Russia, would you want your communications to be managed by an outside entity that has certain economic ties and relations with maybe your primary adversary? Or would you want all of your stuff to be brought in-house and managed by those who are directly allied with you, and knowing that if a conflict were to break out, that your ability to broadcast media to your people that you're highly propagandizing, and while you're a state-run media that's highly authoritarian, you want to maintain control of being able to put the message out that you want to be put out. And you want your people to maintain the ability to receive said message, right? So like, these are all steps that are being taken to fortify their capabilities of maintaining that status quo during a conflict. This isn't just for Russia to get some more money out of the deal or whatever it is, right? Strengthening ties, yes. Building a stronger partnership, yes. But also putting the pieces into place so that when conflict becomes a reality, there is less infrastructure and logistics issues to worry about, so things can be focused on the militaristic side more. Or at least that's what it looks like to me. I'm trying to kind of paint the picture here. They're getting prepared, right, for actual action. This isn't all just separate things that just suddenly began happening, right? This is a strategic step-by-step that we're witnessing right now, which should tell us that there's a good chance that they are going to get further and further involved. And we know that there's reports that they're going to be sending, engineering troops and other sustainment and support style regiments out to Ukraine come mid or end of July. Like, that's what's being talked about. Do we know for a fact that will happen? I mean, obviously we don't know for a fact, but I think there's a good chance that it's going to occur, because that's kind of just the way things are the trajectory looks like right now, right? I was going to say the way things are trajecting, and I'm not sure if you can use that as a verb, but I'm okay with it, okay? Let's see here. I think it'd be cool to mount a Styropyro DIY laser weapon to a quad-rotor drone and name it Bobo, says Bringer of Change. All right, well, there's a lot of ingenuity out there, let's just say, okay? Now, we also have, we'll just call it proof. We don't know for sure. I mean, we don't know anything. We just get told what we're told, right? But we do have research saying that irrefutably, missile debris in Ukraine is North Korean in origin. Right? So North Korea is supplying weapons to Russia, and those weapons are being used in Ukraine right now, very similarly to how the U.S. is supplying Ukraine with weapons, and those weapons are being used in, well, what Russia considers to be Russia right now, but also in Ukraine, right? So, research expert tells UN it has irrefutably established missile debris in Ukraine is North Korean. This is from June 28th. The head of research organization that has been tracing weapons used in attacks in Ukraine since 2018 told the United Nations Security Council on Friday it has irrefutably established that ballistic missile remnants found in Ukraine came from North Korea. The United States and its Western allies clashed with Russia and North Korea at the meeting, saying both countries violated a UN embargo on arms exports from the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. I don't think Russia cares. Russia does not care if the UN likes what they do or not anymore. Like, it's very obvious. Like, the UN may as well be NATO at this point in many ways, right? So who cares, right? But anyway, moving forward. The country's official name, the DPRK. Russia dismissed the baseless accusations, and the DPRK dismissed the meeting as an extremely brazen act to discuss someone's alleged weapon transfers. Jonah Leff, executive director of conflict armament research, gave the council a detailed analysis of the remnants of the missile that struck Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkiv, on January 2nd. He said the organization documented the missile's rocket motor, its tail section, and almost 300 components manufactured by 26 companies from 8 countries and territories. And it determined the missile was either a KN-23 or KN-24 manufactured in 2023 in the DPRK. The organization reached its conclusion based on the missile's unique characteristics: its diameter, distinct jet vane actuators that direct the missile's thrust and trajectory, the pattern around the igniter, the presence of Korean characters on some rocket components, and other marks and components dating back to 2023, he said. Following the initial documentation, our teams inspected 3 additional identical DPRK missiles that struck Kiev and Zaporizhia earlier this year, Leff said. They also observed additional conventional weapons, including an artillery rocket produced in 1977 that had been seized on the front lines and had not been observed on the battlefield previously in Ukraine, that were manufactured by the DPRK and might have been part of a recent larger consignment of rockets. Okay? This is showing that that relationship is indeed strong and active. And when I say active, what I mean is active in the sense of being used conventionally in warfare right now. So, we can go through the rest of this article, but I think in all reality, what this does is kind of verify the fact that North Korea is almost directly involved in the conflict now at this point, right? Like we're aware that their weapons are being used. And if we want to treat it, and if Ukraine wants to treat it the same way that Russia wants to treat things, right? So we can now say, well, Russia's using North Korean supplied weapons in Ukraine, therefore North Korea is at war with Ukraine. It's the same as Russia saying that Ukraine using United States missiles to hit Crimea means that the United States is now part of this war. So using that logic, that's what we're seeing happening right now, and that's what's being verified on the ground. Now, don't get me wrong. Is there the possibility of deception from the West as well? Of course. So that could be part of a campaign to prove why North Korea is a problem and move forward with whatever other types of strategies the West is going to use to try to disarm them or to slow them down. So obviously sanctions is what we generally leverage against North Korea when it comes to slowing down their economic progress. But there's other ways to have additional leverage as well. And don't be surprised if these things are being used for those purposes. I wouldn't be, but I don't have any reason to disagree with that assessment, right? So it makes sense. Russia getting more weapons from North Korea. We know that's been happening. Now they have the partnership that's more public than it was before, but this has been happening for quite a while now. And we all know that Iran has also been providing drones and missiles and everything else. So it's not really new news, but it's just a reiteration that these partnerships are occurring and that this war is expanding further and further outside of the borders of Ukraine and Russia, right? So I'm going to look over here in the chat, trying to get on top of people here when it comes to some of the things we're talking about. Strippers, floor wax strippers, seems like the topic at hand, but I think some of you might be confused about the type that is being discussed. So just make sure you guys help each other get on the same page, because clearly I'm not, but that's where we're at right now. So glad the chat has moved on to more interesting topics. That's why I love all you all. You're amazing. And this is a really good community, by the way. I really appreciate being allowed to be part of it, which by you being here and supporting what I do, it does allow me to be part of this community. So hopefully I'm not bringing the community down. I hope to be an asset if possible. But who knows? I'm sure there's opinions on that as well. Whatever. Here we are. I'm ready to roll. Now, speaking of missiles, they don't all just come from North Korea, but they are in Ukraine. So we got to talk about this, okay? This is a recent event that occurred, and it's in anticipation of the F-16 arrivals in Ukraine. Russia has been hammering air bases in Ukraine, knowing that the F-16s are going to be stationed there, and this is a huge escalation. And we're past accelerating towards our war preparations now when it comes to talking about North Korea. And we have moved in to Russia arming Houthis, which this is not about, but that's the part of the conversation we're currently in, just so we're all on the same page together, especially you, replay crew. Thanks for being here. Russian drone hypersonic missile strikes escalate on Ukrainian airbase ahead of arrival of F-16s. Russian strikes have become a grim reality for Starinoiche. I even looked up how to say this name before this live stream to make sure I was going to say it correctly, and I just totally lost it because I think partially because I'm sick. But the other thing is that it's just a really long word, okay? All right, Starokosniev. I'm gonna put it out there like that. A small city in western Ukraine has faced an influx of Russian strikes due to the anticipated arrival of F-16 fighter aircraft. The most recent attack occurred on June 27th. Frequent attacks, including drone and hypersonic missile strikes, have become a grim reality for Starokosniev, 30,000 residents. I'm trying my best. I never purposely mispronounce things just to be a jerk. Well, I guess there was like that one time, but still, I'm trying my best. And I just lost it. I'm sorry. Explosions reverberated across the pre-dawn sky as the Ukrainian air defense fended off a Russian attack on the small city in western Ukraine, home to an important air base and a frequent target of Moscow strikes. Hours after the assault, the tidy streets of Starokosniev had returned to a semblance of normality. But the June 27th attack was a stark reminder of the challenges Kiev faces as it rebuilds its depleted air force and deploys the first U.S.-designed F-16s, fighter aircraft that Russia will be determined to ground or destroy. Yes, I believe F-16s are nuclear capable. So Russia has said that not only do they consider these targets legitimate, but they also said they would be legitimate targets if they were to land at NATO-controlled air bases as well, or even fly from those bases. So keep that in mind. And don't forget that we've had our leader of NATO say things during press conferences that might have been Freudian slips regarding NATO pilots being in these jets. So that's also problematic. The first planes are expected to arrive this month, and Ukraine hopes they will boost forces struggling to repel a Russian onslaught along the front line, which includes devastating glide bombs that F-16s could potentially disrupt. Officials have not revealed where the F-16s will be based, but Moscow said after the strike on Starokosniev last Thursday that it had targeted airfields it believed would house them. The airbase has come under frequent attacks since the first days of Russia's February 2022 invasion, including from drones and hypersonic missiles. Residents of the historic military outpost of around 30,000 people, nicknamed Starkon in Ukraine's Khmelnytsky region, have learned to adjust to the constant danger. In short, it's fun to live here, said city official and local culture expert Vasil Muliar with a wry smile, speaking after the recent attack. Now, I have to assume that's sarcasm. Hold on. We're back. All right. But here's the thing. I wouldn't doubt if people who still live in that area have grown so accustomed to it that they just use humor to kind of gloss over the fact that they're in a war zone. And that's just kind of human nature in many ways. But I wanted to touch base on that because we were already talking about missiles being found in Ukraine. And this air base is getting hammered. And the use of drones, hypersonic missiles, and everything is always questionable when it comes to what's happening in Ukraine based on what could occur there. And also, we have to remember that these F-16s are, in fact, NATO assets and are using NATO assets to train these pilots or even possibly the pilots themselves when it comes to the use of these fighter jets. Okay. It's something that we should definitely be aware of. Majestic Lion says, get well. I am working on it, I promise. But I'm here for you. I'm doing what I can, all right? So I appreciate the, let's just call it patience from everybody tonight. I really do. Now, sorry for butchering all those names. Like I said, I've tried. I really did. What else is Russia up to right now? Putin mulls arming Houthis with cruise missiles. Why is this problematic? Because what the Houthis have been doing is very detrimental to the global economy, in all honesty. And we're going to pay for it. The companies that are being affected by these attacks are not going to just eat the cost. It'll be passed on to you, the consumer, and everything that goes through the shipping lane will become more expensive as time goes on. That's just a fact. And so this is something that affects us directly, even if we don't notice it immediately, okay? Closer cooperation between Russia and the Houthis in Yemen could exacerbate the strategic dilemma facing Western powers as they seek to protect commercial shipping in the Red Sea and beyond. There are indications that Russian President Vladimir Putin is considering supplying the Iran-aligned Yemeni Houthi movement with anti-ship ballistic cruise missiles. Middle East Eye, citing an unnamed senior U.S. official, reported on Saturday. Okay? Newsweek has contacted the Kremlin via email to request comment. Moscow has been coordinating with the Houthis as part of its growing alignment with Iran, with the Kremlin seeking new and deeper alliances among anti-Western powers following its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. Since Hamas's October 7th attack on Israel and the country's subsequent war in the Gaza Strip, the Houthis have been attacking commercial shipping and Western military vessels operating in the Red, Mediterranean Seas, and Arabian Seas. The organization has vowed to continue and expand its attacks unless Israel fully withdraws from Gaza. Okay? Now, earlier this year, the Houthis agreed not to target Russian or Chinese ships. In March, Houthi Political Bureau member Ali Al-Khanam said there is a constant cooperation and development of relations between Yemen, Russia, China, and BRICS states, as well as an exchange of knowledge and experience in various areas. So this war is expanding. Russia has said that they would arm our enemies, much like we're arming their enemies, and that we shouldn't see anything wrong with that. This is them following through with some of those threats, at least in my opinion. Arming the Houthis with cruise missiles means they'll be more effective at attacking ships in the Red Sea, which will affect us economically, which is what Russia's goal would be there, which means that this war is expanding further and further, almost on a daily basis at this point, right? So, what have the Houthis been doing with their weapons, and why is this so problematic? Well, in case you didn't know, June was the highest rate of attacks from Houthis on ships in different parts of the oceans than any other month in this year so far, 2024. Houthis announced attacks on international ships in support of Gaza. Okay, this is actually from today. Like, this is brand new information. On the 1st of July, Yemeni's Houthi group announced they had conducted military operations targeting 4 ships in the Red Sea, Arabian Sea, Mediterranean Sea, and Indian Ocean, expressing solidarity with the Palestinians in Gaza, Reuters highlights. In a statement, the group's military spokesman, Yahya Saree, reported that their fighters had targeted vessels linked with the United States, the United Kingdom, and Israel using cruise missiles, achieving direct hits. Surprise! They're using cruise missiles. Russia's thinking of arming them with more cruise missiles, and they're getting direct hits now, too. Strange how this is all starting to boil over. Oh, and also, this is with the Ike, our carrier strike group, leaving the Middle East and made its way up to the Mediterranean, while the Theodore Roosevelt just finished its drills with Japan, South Korea, and the United States, and then will be replacing the Ike down in the Middle East. So there is a little bit of a gap here as well in the sense of coverage, let's just call it, right? The statement detailed attacks on the Israeli ship MSC Unific in the Arabian Sea, the American oil tanker Dolonix in the Red Sea, the British landing ship Anvil Point in the Indian Ocean, and the vessel Lucky Sailor in the Mediterranean Sea, without specifying the country associated with the latter. The Houthis have been attacking ships that are Israeli-owned, flagged, operated, or headed to Israeli ports with missiles and drones in support of Gaza ever since October 7th. In response to U.S. and U.K. retaliatory airstrikes on Houthi sites in Yemen, the Houthis announced that they now consider all American and all British ships as military targets. Okay, so Russia arming them and them attacking American ships or British ships will do what? Will create how much tension? Will escalate things to what degree? Will move us towards a more direct conflict, right? Like, this is how global war slowly progresses. It's not something that you just wake up on, Wednesday morning and say, oh, newspaper said global war, so here it is, right? Like, it's not something that just happens overnight, And someone mentioned in my video about North Korea, sending troops to Ukraine and how, like, this is World War III. We're in it right now. We're not talking like it is, but our history books will say it is this and that. And then I compared it to some of the movements of Italy during World War II and how the timeline is kind of similar to, like, the amount of time World War II went on for before the United States ever even got involved, right? So, like, there's a lot of things there. And I know someone argued with me about it, saying that, well, you didn't talk about the buildup and everything else required for the U.S. to finally enter the war, which was all part of the equation, and you're ignoring that, right? And, well, first off, the buildup, I think, is already there, right? Haven't we kind of been placing strategic assets everywhere, increasing our manufacturing capacity when it comes to necessary components for ammunition and things of that nature? But also, that person also left out the fact that Pearl Harbor happened, right? Like, we entered the war because of Pearl Harbor. The years it took us to develop all of the buildup just happened to coincide with that day, right? But, like, we haven't had that moment yet, apparently. Like, that moment, Pearl Harbor has not occurred yet. But if Pearl Harbor happened right now, what do you think the U.S. would do? So this is what we have to be aware of. Like, everything's not an exact copy or a mirror image of what has happened in the past, but we can kind of see how these things start to layer on themselves and how they start to develop, and then kind of understanding those timelines and how historical figures worked together to build alliances and treaties and all these other cooperative actions that were taken before the entire world was at war, right? Like, all of that happened during World War II, but it just wasn't quite called that yet, right? Like, when Germany invaded Poland, it wasn't World War II per se. Same with when Japan was already fighting with China before Germany invaded Poland, right? But no one talks about that. So, like, it's just, we just have to be aware of where we stand right now based on what's happening, and not just dismiss the whole idea that that it's possible, and not just dismiss the fact that we're living through it, right? How's the ground up there in North Dakota for growing a garden? Just wondering. I have excellent soil, but we have very difficult weather. For example, I had a freeze warning in June, right? I also have 80-mile-per-hour wind gusts on a regular basis. All of my trees have survived, though, and I'm very excited about that. So I have 100 plum trees that are growing pretty well. I'm excited about it, okay? Warrior 21 Poet, when SHTF starts for real in the U.S., do you think Russia and China will play the same role the U.S. has in other countries, assisting in the collapse of the government, smuggling, airdropping arms? Yes. I think that the easiest way to defeat the U.S. is not through military action. It's through, subversion, right? And what they've already done to our country regarding, fentanyl and cartel activities and dissent within our own nation when it comes to the division and everything else that we're currently witnessing, and the cultural and societal decay that we're witnessing in our urban environments, all of that has some maliciousness behind it. Some of it you could say is a natural progression of a society that, let's just say, doesn't uphold standards to a degree, right? But you better believe a lot of it is completely malicious and with intent. So yes, I do believe that that would be a likely situation. And don't forget, in major wars in the past, whether or not it was the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, whatever it was, right? There was always foreign influence, right? Like without France, we might not have won the Revolutionary War. Like these are things that we have to remind ourselves of. And I've talked about this in a video that I believe there's certain factions of our country that would be more than willing to accept the aid of those who are more totalitarian in nature, such as China, right? If China offered a certain portion of our country economic benefits, right, stimulus packages, as well as militaristic support and weaponry and technology required in order to defeat some sort of an opponent, they would gladly take it with an open hand, especially if it was guaranteed universal basic income, right, which China could afford to do because they would just get rid of more of what their people are accessing and provide it to our people if they were able to control what they could do then with our country thereafter, right? It would be more financially beneficial for them to have that control than it would be for them to not pay out, right? So, just ideas. All right, Harbor Prepper, I'm glad you were here. And just so you know, I am still doing the private live stream tonight. It's at 9:15. So, just to kind of keep everybody aware of other things that are happening right now, we have European military bases on high alert based on a potential terror threat. Now, this article is saying that the military bases are on heightened alert, not because of a specific threat, but because of major events that are occurring in the area. Now, how realistic that is, I'm not sure. I do agree that the Olympics are a pretty major event with worldwide attention, so it makes sense that that would be a heightened risk environment. But I assume that those in the know are aware of legitimate threats and that in order to keep panic to a minimum and not to dissuade people from traveling to the Olympics and to some of these events, they're not going to put it out there. And for all I know, they could be like the FBI where they're going to let things develop to a certain degree where they might even potentially happen just so they can get more people arrested or get more surveillance or get to the bigger fish or whatever it is, right? So be aware of that. But this is from July 1st, yesterday. U.S. military bases across Europe are put on heightened alert over the weekend due to concerns that terrorist activity or attacks on personnel or installations are likely, according to the Army. However, Pentagon officials said Monday that the move to put all Europe bases on the second highest alert status was not done out of any specific threat, but rather an abundance of caution, given several major public events happening over the summer on the continent, including the Euro Cup soccer tournament and the Olympics. It was due to a combination of factors potentially impacting the safety and security of our service members stationed in the European theater, Sabrina Singh, Pentagon spokeswoman, told reporters Monday. I'm not going to get into more specifics on the intelligence itself, but it's not a single threat. It's a combination of different factors. So that threat level is high. Now, here on the home front, we've also had some additional concerns that were just brought to our attention based on our lack of security at the southern border. And these are people of interest who are missing, right, that we should be aware of. Now, here's an interesting thing. DHS identifies over 400 migrants brought to the U.S. by an ISIS-affiliated human smuggling network. Now, these people aren't necessarily guaranteed to have terror-related ties, but they were smuggled by an ISIS affiliate. And so we don't know how that all works out, right? It could just be a way that they're making money, I guess. But because of the affiliation, suddenly everyone's very concerned. And we have this heightened terror alert going all over Europe. So I'm just trying to, be aware of my surroundings. But this is something that I wanted you all to be aware of too. Now, this story is from June 25th. The Department of Homeland Security has identified over 400 immigrants from Central Asia and elsewhere who crossed into the U.S. in the past 3 years as subjects of concern because they were brought by an ISIS-affiliated human smuggling network, 3 U.S. officials told NBC News. Well, over 150 of them have been arrested. The whereabouts of over 50 remain unknown. Over 50. Hold on, let's do math. 400, 150 have been arrested. We're only looking for another 50. I don't know about you, but my math says that number should be 250. But what do I know, right? Maybe that's the kind of math we have going on at our government agencies right now. Let's be honest. So, one of the U.S. officials said people affiliated with ISIS are operating as human smugglers in Central Asia and helping people there leave their countries and travel to the West, where they are then smuggled into the U.S. It is not known whether the human smuggling activity directly funds ISIS activity or whether ISIS members are making personal money through human smuggling on the side. The official added that the U.S. has no indication that the more than 400 migrants brought to the U.S. by the network have plans to carry out terrorism in the U.S., but immigration agents are looking to arrest them out of an abundance of caution. In this case, it was an information that suggested a potential tie to ISIS because of some of the individuals involved that led us to want to take extra care, said a senior Biden administration official. And out of an abundance of caution, make sure that we exercised our authority in the most expansive and appropriate way to mitigate risk because of this potential connection being made. Now, the crazy part is that had they not been allowed in to begin with, maybe this wouldn't have to be an investigation, or maybe you wouldn't have to find them. Maybe if we secured our border, you wouldn't have to be suddenly so cautious about these people being smuggled in by ISIS. I don't think ISIS is just haphazardly smuggling people across the border just to make some money. I highly doubt it. So just be aware of this. My math says there's 250 people who are smuggled in by ISIS that we don't know where they are. Their math says only 50, so be aware of that. But just be aware also that many of the more than 400 migrants crossed the southern border and were released into the U.S. by Customs and Border Protection because they were not on the government's terrorism watch list, according to 3 officials. And the agency did not have information raising concerns at the time. So, going back to the question we had earlier in the chat, do you think that China and Russia would use tactics to try to hurt us from inside? 100%. And I think that ISIS is part of that equation just as well. But not ISIS, right? But just this current alliance-ship between anyone who hates us and us. And that's just kind of where we're at right now. Now, I do want to mention this really quickly, just because I think it's important, okay? Everyone's talking about Biden being replaced. Look, if you saw the debate, you know just as well as I do that it was a disaster. But at the same time, dropping a U.S. president suddenly is a very chaotic scenario. And we have to be aware of the fact that chaos is good for our adversaries. And so this is a strange situation we find ourselves in, right? But the main thing here is that the way they could get Biden off the ticket, even if he doesn't want to drop out, is by basically using their non-delegated delegates, right? Their non-secure delegates to vote someone else in. It's kind of what the whole moral of the story is. This is how the DNC can get Biden out, right? And I just want you all to be aware that the DNC is August 19th to the 22nd. So be prepared for this to be a tumultuous time period. Because, well, first off, it's in Chicago. So hopefully everyone's, wearing body armor. Because I would be. But second off, this is where it might go down. So be aware that August 19th to the 22nd could be a very chaotic time here in our country. I don't care if you're a Democrat or whatever, right? Like, if you're here to get prepared, that's what we're here for. But I would be very upset if I was a Democrat, which I'm not. I think that's pretty obvious. But I mean, I'm also not diehard Republican or anything like that. Like, I just make up my own mind. That's what I like to do. But I think if I was a Democrat and I wasn't able to vote in a primary, and then all of a sudden, my party just chose someone else out of the ether to replace the guy who's currently the president, just because they decided that was what was best. I would be a little concerned about the direction of that party. It doesn't feel very democratic at that point now, does it? So expect chaos at that time. Because if that happens, a lot of the country is going to have a really hard time accepting what's going on. And we all know that whatever decision they make is probably not going to be the one people want. And the other thing to keep in mind is that we're just on a trail of chaos right now. Because then after that's what, right? Like from now until the election and until January during the transition of power or the maintaining of power or whatever happens, right? There's a lot that can happen. And our adversaries are 100% watching because they're not really sure what they want to do right now. But I do know that based on what we recently saw, I don't care what your political party is or your affiliation, we should all be able to logically admit, as people who are practical, the person we currently have as president is not up to the task. And that's problematic when we're in a global conflict environment. It's insanity, really. Based on that debate performance, could Joe Biden actually repeat nuclear launch codes? You know what I mean? Like, that's the question you should ask, and that should be all you need to know, right? And like that, I don't care what political background you're from. I'm just saying right now, what we have as a president is not a good situation for us as Americans, based on the fact that we are entering a global conflict environment. Like it's just the worst case scenario in many ways. Like it's just not good, right? So here we are. This is what's happening. Okay, Leaving the Matrix says division is their tactic, 100%, and that's why this political sham is a problem that we have here in our country. Because if no one's ever happy, right? If 50-50 is always the divide, nothing beneficial can be done. No one will ever be on the same page regardless, right? Think of it this way. If half the country will always disagree with the other half no matter what, how do you wage a war against a common enemy when one half of the country will almost guaranteed disagree with what it is that's happening, right? China attacks us and we fight back. Half the country will say we shouldn't be fighting China. China's not the problem. Right? Like that's how it's going to go. Like this is where we're at. It's very problematic and very concerning for me. So, Knight, who says Nee, says they'll ask him for launch codes and he'll start naming off ice cream flavors. That might be true. And you know what? I mean, Donald Trump could be in a similar situation. I don't know what happens with that. He definitely seems more cognitive in my opinion. But for all I know, they could be requiring launch codes and he could be talking about golf swings. Like this... It's just where we are, right? Like we have to be aware of the fact that like one of the reasons we're prepared is because our government is like not tip top, right? Like the people who are in charge of ensuring our safety and security when it comes to foreign adversaries, not doing a great job. That's really problematic. Like that's a serious situation. So I think we're gonna call it a night. So, if you want to be in the private live stream, which is starting at 9:15 Central Standard Time tonight, so in 7 minutes, let's say, you can hit the join button down below and join the YouTube channel membership to get access, or you can actually head over to Subscribestar and join me there. It's $5 a month, but it'll get you exclusive content and other stuff too, and you can message me and hang out, and we can just chat about stuff, and that's what these private live streams are. I just put the Subscribestar link in the live chat, but it's also in the description below. But here's the thing. The private live streams are my way of saying thank you to those who want to support the channel directly, right? Which I get. And listen, by hitting the thumbs up, by being here, by watching the videos, by subscribing, by doing all the things, you are supporting the channel directly. And I greatly appreciate it. Some people want to go above and beyond and support the channel financially. So I give those people a way to do that. And then I also do private live streams to say thank you. But there's nothing in those private live streams that I withhold from you all that either can't afford it or don't want to, which is totally understandable. I don't put things in those live streams that's like detrimental to your ability to prepare, right? Like there's nothing in there that's hiding behind a paywall in the sense of important information for preparedness, because that's just not how I roll. So be aware of that. I just like to be able to say thank you to those who want to go above and beyond. That's what it's for. And besides that, if you need anything else from me, go to magicprepper.com. There's also a ton of affiliate links and discount codes and all kinds of stuff on my website. And if there's also a contact form. And in case you're curious, I did translate the over 40-page long document from Germany about their new doctrine for war preparations. And it's on the website on the main page. And it has some really interesting stuff, like the government's plans there for maintaining water and how they may seize certain water supplies in order to ensure that the population has access to water during an emergency. Like, that's all stuff you should probably be aware of, because I have a feeling we'll emulate similar things here, right? So here we are. I appreciate the shrubberies, Knight Who Says Knee. And besides that, that's going to be it for Magic Prepper.